One of the most remarkable scriptures in all the Bible that pertains to prophecy is in Matthew 24. It's probably the most famous scripture that deals with the end times, apart from Daniel 9:24 through 27. But what's astonishing about it is that the disciples of Jesus came to him after he said to them, "You see this temple? See this city? Not one stone will be left standing on another." He was talking about the great destruction that would come upon the city in 70 AD when the Romans would invade and virtually destroy all the trees, knock down every structure except the structures on top of the harem, which today we call the Temple Mount, which no doubt was that 35 acres was the actual Antonia fortress of Herod. And not one stone would be left upon that place. Totally devastated. In fact, the people were so astonished at how it was destroyed, as it's explained by Josephus, that they didn't even think there was a city there before. So complete was the destruction. And Jesus is alluding to this when he's talking to his disciples, saying, not one stone will be left standing upon another. They were incredulous. These guys were simple fishermen that came from Galilee. They followed him down there, and they'd never seen a city like Jerusalem before. They probably heard about it up there 100 miles north. But now that they're there and they see the wonder and the glory of the city, and Jerusalem was patterned after Rome. It was built like Herod was a great builder, and he was loyal to Rome, and he wanted to make Jerusalem the joy of the whole earth, a wonderment. So when these guys that followed Jesus heard him say these things, they couldn't deal with it. They couldn't handle it. So they came back the next day and they said, okay, when will these things be? In other words, when's this destruction going to happen? And when's the sign of your coming and the end of the age? They were asking him eschatological questions about the future. And that's pretty much where most people are at. They want to know what's going to happen. And there's a reason why God doesn't tell us about everything that's going to happen, because we would just be looking for outward signs all the time, instead of what's really important in preparation for our destiny, which is to go into space, is to acquire the divine nature through faith. Faith. And when Jesus was talking about this whole matter of faith, he put it in a parable about a supposed story where someone would come to an unrighteous judge and ask for this and that and the other. And the story kind of ends, to make a long story short, where Jesus says, will the Son of Man find faith when he returns? It's a rhetorical question, but he's asking it because he's anticipating that people were going to not be using their faith, and they would become more interested in the external world and how things would conclude. They'd be looking for signs as consistent with human nature. Lord, show us a sign. Jesus, show us a sign. And today, people are so wrapped up with the external world because of the furnace is being heated up, as we see through the media, the rampant destruction in the cities, the global pandemic around the world. The whole world's wearing masks. And people are wondering, well, what does this mean? Is this a sign? And people are wrapped up with the outer world, and not that the kingdom of heaven is within, and how that's to grow and to develop in such a way that we'll be prepared to go into the heavens. People aren't preparing for the heavens. They want to know how to live on earth. And the Lord said, be in the world, but not of it. So we don't even really belong here. So this moment in time where we live is really a preparation time for our journey into space. And that sounds pretty far out, but that's really what it's all about. And the greatest sign is not the external world. Well, but God did tell us some things about what would happen in the external world, which is basically a void that Satan has filled. The Lucifer who fell has filled this world with all kinds of corruption, diseases, and now we're seeing that our destruction of our cities, it can't be fixed through politics or anything. It can be kind of resisted. Trump is a restraining force, not the restraining force, but part of the restraining force to hold back the lawlessness that's prevailing right now in the cities. But this would just be the external world. The real sign of the end of the age is what's happening in God's kingdom. When it talks about the virgins, 5 are wise and 5 are foolish, that the kingdom would be divided because people didn't know how to use faith, or people did know how to use faith. The ones that knew how to use faith were able to store up the resources of God in their inner person. They're able to hear his voice. And the foolish, they were inept, but they were all part of God's kingdom. That's the big sign, but it's not external. It's something you've got to perceive. I've been to a number of churches in my area trying to find some place where they knew how to worship or where the word is taught properly, and there's just nowhere. It's mostly just entertainment. I don't need to be entertained. It's a difference between entertainment and ministry. And today, the contemporary church doesn't really cut it. So this is the sign that we're to look for, and we're seeing it wherever you go, especially in the United States. It's more about entertaining people than helping them develop their faith. So faith is the victory that overcomes the world, and faith is what we must use to obtain and appropriate the divine nature. But they're asking Jesus specifically, when will these things be? When's it going to be the destruction of the temple? When's it going to be the end of the age? When is the sign of your coming? And the thing that Jesus said is astonishing. He said, don't be deceived. Many will come in my name, saying these are the times. And so the greatest deception that I can see in the last 400 to 500 years, church history, is the misinterpretation of the golden prophecy. And taking us all off course, the whole world is filled with that doctrine now. After Hal Lindsey's book, Hal Lindsey called the father of modern day prophecy, but so much of it is not really good biblical exegesis, not the context that we need to look at it through. And so the world, church world, has fallen for this and have been deceived. I don't know how to say it any more clearly than that, but the greatest thing that we can learn is faith. What is faith? Now, I hate to be salesy, but I'm not selling my book. I'm giving it away for free, the 2 robes, and it'll help you develop your faith. And I'm not talking about creed. I'm talking about the operational use of what God placed within you so that you can exercise it and acquire more of the glory of God and the divine nature, which is what we must have if we're to go into the heavens. So Daniel 9 is basically dealing with God enforcing a covenant on the Jewish people. Now in that time period, the Messiah would come. That's what Daniel 9:24 is all about. In the midst of all this, the Messiah is going to come, and over this period of 490 years, he's going to accomplish some things that are going to right the curse that's come upon the planet, but not necessarily first with the outward world. It's basically the curse that's caused us to be blind. So he begins with us. Now his judgment begun with the household of God, and begins with us what is going to be the fate of the whole world. So Daniel 9 is about this context of time and what's going to happen in this 490 years, so that we're watching it happen, this plot play out, while we're learning how to walk by faith. It's not to fundamentally focus on the outside world, But God doesn't leave us blind with that either. He's gracious. And he tells us these things so we can understand the world in which we live and not succumb to it, having done all to stand. So the reasonings of hell, which is manifested now in the outside world. When I say outside world, I mean, I'm talking about our bodies are part of the outside world. Our bodies are perishing. The outside world is perishing. Everything in this world dies. But our inner man, which is our spirit, and also the psyche, our psyche that's been victimized, our psyche is our soul, which has been victimized by living in this world and all the diseases that we acquire. I'm not talking about physical diseases now. I'm talking about psychological diseases that you see in people. People today, you look at the looting. These are people that are deeply diseased, mentally deranged people, and people in the church come out of that and come into God's kingdom, and hopefully they're getting delivered of many of the soul's diseases, the psychological diseases. But I'm not sure how much that's working anymore. We live in a fallen world, and God explains what's going to happen to the outside world through prophecies. But all the prophecy is not about foretelling the future. It's forthtelling. It's also forthtelling, and fundamentally more forthtelling than foretelling. It's both. But people are focused on the foretelling because they're so insecure about their lives, they want to know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. Got to know what's going to happen. And so they think that what's going on in the Middle East, the fulfillment of this misunderstood enforcing of the covenant, for he will make a peace plan, and it's not a peace plan at all. That's being talked about there in Daniel 9:27. So we have fallen victim to many will come in my name saying I'm Christ, and not they themselves are Christ, but that he is Christ, and misuse his name. It's kind of like a spiritual forgery, slapping Jesus' name onto doctrines, especially specifically now eschatological doctrines that pretty much the whole world's believed in. And he said this was going to happen and deceive many. I think the many is everyone. And I remember when I was first getting started in the Lord, people would talk to me about this golden prophecy, and what they said is, well, I just accepted what they were teaching or saying. It's taken me many years to step back and look at this through my own study, and I encourage you to study the scriptures yourselves in light of what I'm saying too, so that you have more light on the subject. Now, the next time I speak, I want to talk about Daniel 9:27, 9:28, where it says he will make a covenant with the many for 7 years, because most people think, well, this 7 years has not happened yet. Those 7 years of the tribulation, they think. And I want to lay it clear so that you have more light on the subject and can think for yourself. Until next time.